Hi, everybody. You might be approaching the end of your financial year, and it's the perfect time to get your Sage 50 accounts in order. The year end process itself is simple. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned pro or if it's your first time, it's just a few steps in the wizard. But before you dive in, there are some important checks and housekeeping tasks that will just make everything run smoothly. Things like archiving your company data just keeps it organized and improves performance. We'll show you how to create an archive and why it's a good habit. Then there's backing up your data, which is essential before making any changes, and we'll share best practice just to ensure your backups are reliable. And avoid accidental postings into a closed period by setting a lock date. It's quick to do and it saves headaches later. We'll also guide you through the year end wizard as well, step by step, so you can complete the process with confidence. If you need to tidy up older unused records, we'll show you how to do that as well in our Delete Your Records webinar. And then we'll also cover how to clear the audit trail. It can help speed things up, and we'll explain when it's appropriate and how to do that safely. So to help you to prepare, we're hosting a series of live webinars throughout January and February. These sessions will give you practical tips and demonstrations so you feel confident about your year end and keep your accounts in great shape. Don't miss this opportunity to start the new year with clean, organised data and peace of mind. Make sure you reserve your spot today at sage.co.uk/webinars, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Hi everyone, it's that time again when you might be starting to think about your year end. The year end process itself is straightforward. It's a simple wizard that includes a few options. However, before this, there's the preparation stage, ensuring you've posted everything, and of course, it involves running reports. But do you understand your reports and also the opportunities that you have to develop them? Ensuring they're accurate, but also that they provide you with a correct level of detail. Throughout January and February, we're running a series of live webinars to help develop your knowledge and understanding of the management reports available in Sage 50 accounts. We'll be starting with the basics, understanding nominal records and the structure of the nominal ledger. This is also ideal if you need to create new nominal codes. Following on from this, we'll examine the chart of accounts, looking at all aspects, including adding new layouts and editing existing ones. Our attention then turns to the management reports themselves, the trial balance, the profit and loss, and of course the balance sheet. We'll explain how to run them, what they show, and most importantly, how the figures calculate. We want you to be confident. On the management report session, one of the most common scenarios we're asked about is where you haven't yet run your year end, but need to generate a profit and loss report for your next financial year. We've got your back with this and have a specific webinar that explores the options you have available, whether it's running reports for your new financial year or even a previous one. The last webinar in the series looks at reconciling your age debtors and age creditor reports at year end, ensuring that the balances agree with the figures on your trial balance and the balance sheet. Of course, this could be done at any time, such as part of your month-end process. So come along and we'll demonstrate what to check and how to run them to ensure everything agrees. If you'd like to attend any or all of these sessions to help develop your knowledge and boost your confidence, then simply head along to sage.co.uk/webinars and register for your free place. These, along with loads of other topics, including how to run your year end, are available. See you soon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Just myself running the session with you all this morning, so do bear with me if you've got questions. I'll try and get round to them as quick as I can. But this is part of our, I suppose, part of our data management series of webinars this session. So clearing your audit trail. So getting rid of those older transactions that maybe you no longer need in your live company, but it is optional. We'll be covering all aspects of clearing your audit trail, and we'll run through a bit of a demo in today's session. Right, now just before we get stuck in, what I'm going to do, if I can find the right option, is run through a quick bit of housekeeping for you. So during today's session, your microphone will be muted. You can't unmute yourself during the session. So if you've got one, that's done automatically for you. If you've got any questions though, you'll need to click the little speech bubble icon. You may have, if you've joined via your browser, you may find that icons along the toolbar along the top of your screen. I think it's towards the upper right corner, if that's the case. So just give that a click. It'll expand the panel for you and you'll be able to start typing in any questions. Remember to click send, otherwise we won't see those. There's also an opportunity to download a copy of today's slides via the handout option. So do take that opportunity during the session if you are wanting a copy of those. You will find the detailed sort of step-by-step notes to clearing your audit trail. You'll find that available from our help center. So the handouts aren't supposed to be comprehensive, just give us a little bit of structure to what we're talking about today. Now this webinar is being recorded just like normal, and as usual you will get a follow-up email which is normally sent round about an hour after we finish. So that will include a link to today's recording. It'll include a link to our registration page. Currently our timetable runs up to the end of March, which also includes our new digital badge series of webinars for invoicing this time round. So do get yourself registered, they're all free to attend. And you'll also get a link to our recordings page. So if there's any sessions that you've missed or maybe you've attended previously and you weren't ready to follow that through, or you just need a bit of a recap on a specific topic, then do check out our recordings. So as I say, you'll get that run about an hour after we finish. For today's session though, this is what we're going to be covering. So what does the Clear Audit Trail option actually do? We're going to talk a little bit about criteria. So what criteria does each transaction need to sort of meet to be able to be cleared? We'll talk about preparation. So if you're thinking about clearing your audit trail, how can you make it as sort of effective as possible? We'll run through obviously a demonstration so you can see what the process actually looks like. And then I'm going to have a bit of a recap almost. So common question this one, where people have run Clear Audit Trail, but transactions haven't cleared. So we'll have a bit of a recap on that criteria. And if you are in that position, how you can go about essentially checking. So we'll run through that and give you an idea of what you need to do just to make that a bit easier. Right at the end, I'll explain more about the additional support. And as usual, if there's anything outstanding question-wise, I'll hang around and pick that up as best I can. But do keep your questions and your comments coming as we're running through. So let's start with a little bit of background first of all. So Clear Audit Trail, what does it actually do? Well, first of all, I must mention it is an option. It's not something that you have to complete. It is completely optional. I'm going to come back to that one in the common questions as well. So what does it actually do though? It removes transactions from your audit trail. So your audit trail being your transactions list. So when you go into your software and you've got that transactions on the navigation bar down the left, when you click that, and it shows you all the invoices and credits and payments, receipts and journals, all of those transactions, that's essentially your audit trail. So we'll remove transactions from that meet specific criteria. And probably the key one is the date that you specify. So if the date is prior to the date you specify when you run through the option, potentially it could clear it, but it does meet other criteria as well. Now, if transactions are cleared from the likes of a nominal record, which inevitably there will be, if required, it will also post an opening balance journal. Doesn't post any opening balances against customers. I'll try and explain why when we get onto the criteria. But potentially it may need to do it for journals. So where it might get rid of more debits than credits from a particular nominal code, for instance, it does an opening balance so that the correct historical balance is maintained. And it will also create an audit trail history report as well. So we're giving you a list of the transactions that have been cleared. Now, the common questions that we always get in relation, when we run this session or just in general, maybe people contact our support team and discuss, you've run year end and actually it hasn't cleared anything. Year end itself doesn't clear any transactions. It will clear down your year end balances by posting some journals, but it doesn't remove any information. So coming on to those questions, those common questions, have you got to? Already mentioned, it's an option. If even after this webinar, if you're not 100% certain whether you want to clear your audit trail or not, then just don't do it. If you're 100% certain, you understand what it does and why you're doing it and maybe the benefits of doing that, then yeah, might be something that you do consider. Pros and cons. Obviously, the downside is that potentially you're going to be removing old information. So you're removing that transactional information from your live data, as it were. But the positive side, the benefits of clearing your audit trail, there's a number of those. So you're going to have less transactions. Less transactions mean it's going to run more efficiently. Backups are going to be that bit smaller. Your reports should run that bit faster. If you run check data, obviously there's less information to check. So benefits wise, it's all about efficiency, making things run just that little bit quicker. Now, how much quicker? Nobody can tell you that. You'll only know by, I suppose you'd only know by running a report beforehand, timing it, see how long it takes, and then after you've cleared your audit trail, you run it again. But if there is a significant change, you are going to notice that. When would you run clear audit trail? Well, you can actually run it at any time. The most common time to run it is after you've run your year end. I think a lot of people do think that forms part of the year end process. It doesn't. It's an extra task that you can complete after running your year end. So how often as well? Normally, probably once a year. You can run it as often as you want. There's no restriction on that. But more commonly, if you are going to do it, then you would do it immediately after running your year end. But you can run it at any time. If you run year end and you think, oh, I forgot about clearing your audit trail, I'll come back to it 3 months later, you can still do that. That's not a problem. But most commonly, how often? Probably once a year, just after running year end. Now, I mentioned it's an option, and as part of that option, when you run the Clear Audit Trail wizard, it will ask you what date do you want to clear up to. So that forms part of this criteria that transactions must meet for you to be able to delete transactions. So the transaction must be dated, first of all, on or prior to the date that you specify. Now, the date you specify must be prior to the start of your current financial year. Will not let you enter a date within or even beyond the end of your financial year. I've seen that in the past where people do it into the future and you think, why on earth are you doing that? It will not let you. That was locked down very, very early on. So it must be essentially prior to the start of your current financial year. The transaction itself must be flagged as having been fully paid. So if it's an invoice, it must be fully paid. If it's a bank transaction, it must be bank reconciled. If it's a VATable transaction under your VAT scheme, it must be VAT reconciled. Lots of reconciles here. If you on the subcontractor, so if it's use the CIS scheme, then if it's a subcontractor transaction, so it's classed as a CIS transaction, then it must be CIS reconciled. So it must have appeared on a CIS return. And also if you use the charity options, if you've got a transaction which is flagged as being gifted, then it must be gifted reconciled as well. So it must have been, again, must have been included on the gifted reports. Now that final bullet there, it says if allocated or linked transaction must also meet the criteria. I'm going to explain that with a bit of an example, what I mean by that. But basically, let's say you've got an invoice and you've got a payment against that invoice. Both transactions must meet that criteria that's listed there to be cleared. Otherwise, it won't clear either. So just as a quick example, before we're going to get stuck into a demonstration in just a couple of moments. So just as an example, let's say we've got a sales invoice. It's dated in December 2023. It's flagged as having been fully paid. It's VAT reconciled. It's been paid by a receipt, which is dated January 2024, so in the following month. It's bank reconciled. Now, if you clear the audit trail, and let's say you clear up to the end of 2023, then the invoice would meet that criteria that we've just discussed. So it's dated prior to the date that you specify. It's flagged as having been fully paid. It's VAT reconciled. But the matching transaction, what you term the allocated transaction, doesn't meet that criteria. It meets most of it, but it doesn't meet the date criteria. And therefore, because that one isn't cleared or can't be cleared, then the invoice can't be cleared either. Excuse me. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, there are reports which will help track that sort of process down for you. So Debbie, you mentioned there you've got historical transactions that you've not been able to clear from the audit trail. Come on to that a little bit later on. So how you can have a look at that and where you'll find additional information, including the reports, that will help you determine why transactions haven't cleared. Now, I just want to quickly mention before we get stuck into the demonstration, a little bit about preparing to clear your audit trail. So the tasks involved. Now, some of these will, if you think about that criteria that we just mentioned, some of them will be quite obvious. But before you go down the preparation, or before you get to the point where you're clearing your audit trail, you want to check your data, make sure there aren't any issues. We'd normally check your data immediately after as well, just to make sure there are no issues. You take a backup. It will force you to take a backup as you go through the clear audit trail option. Normally recommend that you maybe take an archive of your data as well. Now, if you do this as part of the year-end process, so you run year-end and then you think, well, I'm going to clear the audit trail now, you'll have checked your data, you'll have taken a backup, you'll have archived taken an archive of your company so that you can refer back to the archive company, which shows that older information, which might be stripped out of your live company. So you can refer back to that archive if needed. Print your reports. Now, I say if required there because chances are it's information you want to get rid of, so you no longer need that information in your live company. So do you actually need a report that includes that or not? Allocate your transactions. So have you got customers or suppliers where maybe you've got an invoice, maybe you've got a credit, but actually they've never been allocated together. So those transactions would not be flagged as having been paid. So because of that, they're going to be flagged as outstanding, and therefore they would not be cleared when you try to clear your audit trail. Reconcile your bank accounts. Now, if you don't reconcile your bank accounts in Sage, you can actually go into the bank record itself, and there's a little tick box that you can say no reconciliation. So it doesn't then need to consider that. That's on a bank account by a bank account basis, that one. And then finally, reconcile your VAT return. So again, going back to what we mentioned earlier, transactions need to be VAT reconciled. Now, the reason I include that one, and it's not very common now because of Making Tax Digital being introduced for VAT. Prior to Making Tax Digital, it's quite common where people would just send a backup to their accountant and they would let them sort out the VAT return. And on their live company, they would never actually generate the VAT return itself. So it could mean that transactions historically weren't actually VAT reconciled. You submitted a VAT return, but you've never on your live company actually reconciled it, but not very common these days. but I thought I would mention it just to be on the safe side. Right, what we're going to do, we're going to run through a bit of a demo for you. So we'll go back to my screen in just a moment. A couple of things to think about though that I want to mention. And I can't stress this once enough with it being an optional task. First of all, are you sure it's what you want to do? Now in Sage, there's no hard limit to the number of transactions that you can enter. There is a recommended limit of 250,000 transactions, but it's not a hard limit, so we'll let you continue past that. It's just got to start suggesting if you get to 250,000, right, well, you either should really consider maybe starting to clear down information, get rid of older information, or possibly are you on the right software? Is there other Sage software which might support your needs better if you're a high sort of, if you've got that many transactions in your software? So as I say, recommended limit is 250,000, but it's not a hard limit. The other thing to think about as well is if you are going to clear it, when would you clear up to? So I already mentioned you can't clear up to a date within or beyond your current financial year. Just bear me one moment there, please. Sorry about that. Didn't want to cough in your ears and blast you. So when should you clear up to? So you can't clear up to a date within or beyond your current financial year. So you've got to clear up prior. Now, it's a question of how far back do you need your live data to go? So in your live company, do you need to look at the previous year's data? Do you need to look earlier than that? And how far back do you need that to go? Guaranteed, if you were to clear up to almost like the start of your current financial year, as it were, so you've got your current financial year intact, but anything prior to that, you might think, well, actually, I'll just get rid of it. So you're guaranteed in that position. As soon as you do that, you'll get a query. And then you'll need to start looking at things like company archives and things like that to find maybe that older information. So have a good think. Normally on a day-to-day, daily basis, how far back do we need our live data to go? It's quite common that you'll have all of your current years plus one. So all of the previous year's data is in there as well. Prior to that, you might start thinking, well, actually, we never refer to that in our live company. If we do need it, might be few and far between, then we could always refer to a company archive. Anyway, I'm going to show you the process so you can see what that actually looks like. Find the right option. There we go. Right, so today I'm using it's version 33, but the process that we're looking at is exactly the same. Now, I did mention earlier about bank accounts. So if we go into bank accounts, I'll just quickly show you this little setting within it. So if you've got an account that maybe doesn't have much activity against it, for instance, or you don't receive a bank statement for, you can actually come into it and you can tick this little box here to say no bank reconciliation. It means that any transactions posted to it potentially could be cleared when you clear Audit Trail, and it doesn't have to be flagged as being reconciled. So it wouldn't consider that as part of the criteria for any transactions posted at this specific bank. Now, if you're wondering how many transactions you've got, two things you can do. First, just on your toolbar, your status bar, bottom right-hand corner. So in my case, just above where it shows the Windows time and date. Mine says 5,088. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that's how many transactions I currently have. What it means is that's my last transaction number. So if I go into transactions, the last transaction on my list, 5,088. If you've never cleared the audit trail, it's going to agree. Now, if you need to check how many transactions you've got, or if you've cleared the audit trail before, you can go to Help at the top, into About, give it a moment to load the relevant screen. And if I just scroll down a little bit, so center column here, we've got data information. It says headers and splits. Now, chances are it will not be this. These two won't be the same numbers on yours. You're probably going to have a lot less headers than splits. Now, if you're wondering what headers and splits, even usages, are all about, we've got a webinar coming up on transaction grouping. So maybe get yourself signed up for that one. But putting it briefly, if you think about, if you've entered an invoice, and let's say it's got 10 items on it, that will be 10 splits. So when it goes onto your transaction list, you've got 10 transactions. But it also groups them together. And when they're grouped together, that's what we term a header. So potentially you'd have one header, but 10 splits. So splits is the individual transactions. So that's how many you actually have. So if you want to check, that's how you can check how many you've got. Over here on the left in the configuration information, you've got clear audit trail date. Now, if it says N/A, not applicable, it means that you've never cleared your audit trail. If it's got a date in there, it means that's when it was last ran, the clear audit trail option. That's when you cleared up to. Right, now to clear the audit trail, to access the option, obviously you'll need all your colleagues to be out of this specific company, so they'll need to be logged out. You go to Tools, Period End, and then you have an option at the top there, Clear Audit Trail. Click yes to that little window that pops up, and it will then bring up the wizard. Quite a simple wizard, this one. So it gives you some information along the lines of what I've just mentioned there about the criteria, and also what date do you want to clear up to. So this is where you've got the choice. Now it will default to the day prior to the start of your previous financial year. So in my instance, this set of data, the financial year starts January 25, runs up to December 2025. So we haven't run the year end on that one yet. So all of that one would be intact. All of 2024 would be intact, but the default date is defaulting to the day prior to that. So what it's saying is, right, prior to the previous start of the previous financial year, any data in my system I might want to get rid of. I can change that date. If you want to change it, just click in the box and override it, or select it from the calendar icon. But I'll just leave it as that. Now you may or may not get this little box at the bottom here where it lists your bank accounts. Now, if you switch some of your bank accounts off to say, I don't need to reconcile those, then they'll not be listed in here. They will be listed when you've got transactions and you've never really reconciled them. It'll show you when you last did that. Now, 1210 and 1220, I'm just going to tick to get rid of. I want them to be flagged. So rather than go into the bank records themselves and tick that little box, I'll just say, well, actually, I don't really receive a statement for these. I don't need to reconcile them. So I'll just tick that. That's fine. The other one, it's saying it was last reconciled up to the 22nd of January 2025. That's fine. I'm clearing up to a date prior to that date, so nothing to worry about. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to click Clear Audit Trail. Now this is where it forces you to take a backup. When you take a backup, you want to make sure you include data files. If you want to include other options as well, you can, that's fine. But make sure you do include data files. Give it a file name, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just going to call it I'll just do pre-cat. And I'll put the date in as well. So we're going to do 31st, 12, 23. And I'm just going to store mine on my desktop. Obviously, if you want to store it somewhere else, just click Browse and choose where you want to store that backup file. Other than that, I'm just going to click OK. So it prompts me as well, would you like to check your data before you back up? So I'll click yes to that one. It's really quick on mine as well. As I say, I've only got 5,000 transactions, so really, really quick. It's local data on mine as well. It's not running across a network. It's not running across remote data access or anything like that. It's just, I've essentially got a standalone installation on my laptop here. So really quick, as you'll see. So I'm going to click yes to check the data. So it's literally so quick. It doesn't even give me a progress bar on mine. So we just OK that. Obviously, if you get a progress bar, just let it run through. If there were, so it doesn't find any problems, but if there were, you would just click the relevant error warning or comments tab down the side, and it would outline what the problem is. And you then can click the help at the top, and you can search for that error warning or comment. It'll give you a list of, you'll be able to search for that specific error warning or comment, find out what it means, and if anything, what you need to do about that. So no issues in my case. Just click close. It then whizzes through that backup. Again, really quick in my case, just takes a few seconds because it's a tiny set of data I've got. Tells me the backup has been successful. So I OK that. And then we get this progress bar here on the wizard. So we just let that run through. Again, really quick. But it then tells me 1,330 transactions have been removed from the audit trail. Would I like to view them? I can tick the box if I want. Just OK that. Just runs the report, and then it gives you that list. As you can see, it's got a list there. Could be quite a lengthy report, this one. So even on mine, it's 151 pages. Those 1,000 and odd transactions that it's managed to get rid of, it will list them. So in my case, 151 pages of transactions. Do I need that? Do I not? I could always export it and just save it as maybe save it as a PDF, pop it on my desktop. Pop in a reference so I can see what that relates to. I'll just save that as a PDF. Other than that, I close out and returned back to the Clear Audit Trail wizard, and that's it done. Let's close out. So really simple task, just in case, obviously in yours, if you've got a lot more transactions or you're running across a network, it's probably going to take a lot longer than what mine has. Now, for those possibly one step ahead, you remember I had 5,088 transactions, and now it's saying you've got 5,133. So what it does is, it's not saying this is the number of transactions I've got. What it's saying is that's your last transaction number. So if I pop into the transactions list, go right to the bottom, you'll see I've got some opening balances. Now these opening balances are basically posted against nominal codes. They're not posted against customers or suppliers. They are posted against nominal codes only. So it's just to maintain the balance on the account. So in this case, if we just pick an example, nominal 7,300, when it's cleared the audit trail, more credits have been removed than debits from that nominal code. So postage credits in this case for the difference, which in this case is just £15 on the one I've chosen, and it dates that journal, on the date that we cleared the audit trail up to. So it's nothing to worry about. It is doing its job. It's doing exactly what we expect it to do. But it does have to post these opening balance transactions just to maintain those balances. If we go back to help and about, moment to load. We scroll down. So this data information at the top, you'll now see that although our last transaction number is 5,133, which it also says here, you'll see that the splits have reduced considerably. So where we had 5,088, it's now 3,803. If you're wondering, you're just looking at this number and think, well, it hasn't cleared anything. Help about, and splits is essentially the number of transactions that you've got. So that's the key indicator one. So you can check how effective it's been. And obviously, you've got that message when it ran through the wizard, when it would finished. Right, I'm going to go back to the slides for a moment. Now, once you've cleared your audit trail, so you've gone through it, you've entered your date, you ran it. And this links in nicely with Debbie's question from earlier. Why haven't my transactions cleared? I've got historical transactions. I've tried to get rid of them, but I just can't. Why is that? It's a very common question. Why haven't my transactions cleared? Well, have a look at them. You're going to need to look at them really individually. You might find a common theme, but have a look at them. So what's the transaction number? Once you've got that transaction number, have a look in transactions. Maybe that's where you got the transaction number from in the first place. So have a look in transactions and check the criteria that we mentioned earlier. Does it meet that criteria? If it doesn't, that's what it's something, it hasn't met part of that criteria. It might be all of the criteria, but it certainly hasn't met all of it. So it'll be something that's preventing a transaction from being cleared. And then finally, that third point there, do all linked transactions meet that criteria? So is it the allocated transactions thing that we're talking about? Now, we included a link, so this might be handy for you, Debbie. If you download the handout, this link that I've included, it will take you off to our help center. It basically covers the process of tracking down why transactions haven't cleared. So there are additional reports that you can download which specifically look at sort of the allocation aspect of that. But if I just quickly pop back to my screen for a moment, get back to my desktop. And we're in the transactions screen. So if I go right to the top, you can see transaction number one, it still exists. Why is that? Well, we can see it's dated 2014, so it was definitely prior to the date that we specified. But if we keep scrolling across to check the other criteria, so in this case, paid, it's got an N. It's got to be fully paid to be able to be cleared. We might have a credit note for an equal value, but actually, because we haven't allocated those transactions, it means this transaction isn't flagged as having been paid. You can see I've got loads of them as I go down that list there. But check the other criteria as well. So if it's a bank transaction, does it have either a dash or an R in the bank column indicating it's reconciled, or if it's a dash meaning it doesn't need to be bank reconciled? If it's VATable under your scheme, in the VAT column, is there an R indicating it's reconciled, it's being accounted for on a VAT return? If it's got a dash, it means it's not a VATable transaction under your scheme. If there's an N, it means it is VATable under your scheme, but it hasn't been included on a VAT return within your software. Again, it might go back to when I was mentioning it earlier, where maybe your accountant's done it for you. So if that's the case, it's the VAT element holding it back. It might just be a case you run a dummy VAT return at some point. So just a case of running through that criteria. You'd need to do it on a transaction by transaction basis, but you'll probably find a common theme there. There's something obvious that you've maybe missed. Right, let's quickly pop back to the slides. And I just want to quickly have a bit of a recap on those common questions that we mentioned at the beginning. So first of all, have you got to clear your audit trail? No, it's optional. Pros and cons. Remember the downside, it's getting rid of historic information. So you can't then refer back to that in your live company, as it were. If you need to then refer back to that information which is being cleared, you'd need to be maybe either going into an archive that was taken when that information did exist in your live company, or possibly even using a backup that you can, these days you can restore a backup into your practice company. So you could always restore into your practice company, check whatever you needed, and then revert back to your live company. Advantages, obviously, if you clear it, you would expect your backups to be that bit smaller, check data to be quicker, that type of thing. Again, when and how often, whenever you want. Most commonly immediately after year end, but you can do that as many times as you want. Now, I've got a couple of questions. I'll pick those up in just a moment. Just want to quickly bring up that sort of my final slide. Again, if you've got any questions or comments, pop them in there. I'll try and pick them up before everyone leaves. I've got a couple that are outstanding there. Again, if anyone wants a copy of the handout, do take that opportunity while you're on the session today. Loads of webinars coming up between now and we're currently booked in until the end of March. So do check those out. Loads of sessions on there, whether it's other aspects of clearing old information, such as customers, suppliers, nominal records, bank accounts, getting rid of all their invoices, orders, quotations, product records. Again, it's all about keeping your software running as efficiently as possible. But loads of sessions to get yourself booked onto if you're interested. Right, I'm going to open up to some questions just at that point. So, Debbie, you mentioned you already know why the items have not cleared. They've not been VAT reconciled. So if they're really old and you're in that position that I was describing where the really old transactions, it was prior to Making Tax Digital being introduced. So you never as such generated VAT returns from your software as such. So you weren't forced to do that prior to MTD coming along. It would be quite common just to calculate your VAT return and print out a report and then just cancel out of that. So you never actually reconciled, or maybe your accountant did it on their system. So that, again, they never reconciled in your software. So if that's the case, what you would do is you would go into the VAT area. Let me just try and show that as well. Quickly share my screen again. So if you went back into the VAT area, you'll see what VAT returns you do have. So I've got some going way back on this set of data, but you could always go into a VAT return and just enter a date range for an old period. It doesn't have to necessarily be a quarter. I could just say, right, well, actually, in my instance, I could have specified, let's say, December 2023. And then when I calculate that VAT return, it's going to look for any transactions which aren't currently flagged as being reconciled in that month, but also it'll look prior to that period as well. And it means I can just include all of those transactions. It'll generate essentially a dummy VAT return, including all those transactions, and I could just say, right, reconcile them and flag them. If you do that and then try clearing your audit trail again, you mentioned that's potentially the reason why, then hopefully that will let you remove them. A question from Lorraine as well. Your last audit trail was in 2005. If you run a clear audit trail to 2015, should I do it year by year, or can you run it over the 10 years? Yeah, just choose the 1 date. I think you're probably going to find it's just pointless. Might be a little bit quicker doing it in chunks as opposed to doing it in one fell swoop. So, but there'd be nothing to stop you just saying, right, I want to clear my audit trail up to, in your case, end of December 2015. And it would just, again, it would just identify, there's no advantage doing it individual years, other than, you know, if you wanted to split it into chunks and just do it sort of a year at a time. But other than time, no advantage whatsoever. So I'll probably recommend that you just do it in one go if you're going to do that. Question from Maeve. Do the opening balance journals have any impact? Prior year P&L accounts are already cleared to zero. No, they won't. So if you think about when you run a year end, I'll try and keep it in simple terms. So when you run a year end, it'll post a journal to clear down whatever that year end balance was. So that will have a whatever the date is on that. That's on that. Now, if you clear your audit trail and it gets rid of so many transactions, it might even get rid of your year end journal, depending when you clear up to. What it will do to maintain the balance as at the date that you've cleared up to, it may need to post that opening balance journal, but it's not going to change it otherwise. So it's not gonna, you're not gonna see when you run the likes of a balance sheet, for instance, it's not, you're not gonna see any sort of prior year adjustment appearing in your capital and reserve section, or you're not gonna see brought forward balances appearing against any of your profit loss nominal codes. So it's absolutely fine. And that's partly because you cannot clear up to a date within or beyond your current financial year. So nothing to worry about in that one, Maeve. Any additional questions at all for me? Again, when you're running that process as well, it's going to force you to take that backup, which you would always want to do. And it means that if you do then clear your audit trail, and let's say you specify the wrong date, or actually you don't gain anything from it, if you needed to, you could always revert back to that backup. But that would be a decision you would probably want to make straight away. Because otherwise, if you start processing and you then decide it later on that you actually, I'm going to go back to that set of data when I took that backup, it means that it's going to take you back to that point in time, and you're going to have some data entry to key in again. Hope that makes sense. Right, so I've got a question, next one from, is it Iwona? Hope I'm pronouncing that right, or Iwona. So you see you've got an unpaid invoice from 2023 because your colleague never allocated and reconciled the transactions. I'm assuming that's why. So you mentioned there, can you remove it if you were sure that it was paid? So if it depends, if that transaction was, if you've entered an invoice and it was paid, where is the payment? Has it been recorded in your accounts? Was it entered as maybe a bank receipt rather than a customer receipt? So it depends on what's being posted in that situation. I can't really give you any accurate advice on that one. Probably your best bet is to speak to a member of our support team, and they can take a look at that with you and discuss that specific situation. Right, okay, we're just about ready to wrap up in that instance, I think. So we'll just bring up that my final slide again. So let me quickly thank you for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it. There will be a little survey to complete that should pop up as you leave today's session. It should take you about a minute. So if you've got any thoughts on the webinar itself, or topics you'd like to see covered going forward, or maybe ways that we could improve the webinars, just to enhance the experience a little, let us know. Pop it on there. It should take you a minute max. And the follow-up email with a link to today's recording a link to our registration page so you can get registered for some of the other sessions we've got booked in, and also a link so you can watch other recordings as well. That will be with you in round about an hour's time. So we're going to end the webinar at that point. Once again, many thanks for coming along. Have a great weekend. Hopefully we'll see you on some other webinars next week. Many thanks.